Welcome, welcome to the law, your money, and you. I'm Roberta Saphire, an attorney in Sharon, Massachusetts, and
just in case you didn't hear it, welcome again to the law, your money, and you. Roberta didn't say it as many times as she should have, I guess. I don't know. So anyway, I'm Camille Barron and with Roberta, and I am a financial organizer and healthcare advisor, also in Sharon, Massachusetts. And today we have a return guest because this gentleman has so much experience in a very important field, especially today with all that's going on, Roberta.
Yes, we welcome back Commissioner David Cohen, who has been around a long time, but he still has his sense of humor. He let his hair grow out. and so we have a silver lining on his silver head. But all kidding aside, he's a very serious job. Commissioner Cohen, start with your background, and where we left off the last time was where do we go from here? So just give a general, and then we'll pick up where we left off because we didn't have enough time.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank Camille and you and Bobby for having me on. It's an honor to be on your show. So I want to thank you both very, very much. Very quickly, my background, I spent 35 years with the Central Intelligence Agency, to include service as the Deputy Director for Operations. That's the person who's responsible for all the clandestine services of the country, global espionage, counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and what have you. They retired in 2000. After 9/11 in 2001, I was asked by then Commissioner Kelly of the NYPD and Mayor Bloomberg to return to public service as the NYPD, New York City Police Department Deputy Commissioner for Intelligence, which I did. Did that for the entire 12 years of the Kelly-Bloomberg administration. Retired for the second time.
You made some changes there. You revamped the whole police department, and as a result of that, because I want to summarize it, what was the result of your efforts? Which were
well, the key thing is in the wake of 9/11, we had to restructure the NYPD intelligence program to address the terrorist threat to New York City, which was in the aftermath of 9/11, was very intense. So we completely restructured it because, the theme of the time was that we cannot rely on the federal government for everything regarding our protection and defense against terrorism. So we redesigned it. The NYPD is a powerful and very strong and capable organization, but we needed to focus on what for us was a new threat. Of course, the terrorist threat to New York City has a long history. You could trace it back to 1908, when there was a suicide attack back then with the bomb carried on a horse and wagon. The marks of that attack are still etched into a building on Wall Street. So it has a long history. We had to redesign the department in 2002 to address the terrorist threat emanating from the global jihad.
But the story doesn't end there. Then didn't he call upon you to go outside the country or to?
Well, what happened? Well, two things with respect to outside the country. One of the most fascinating innovations of the post 9/11 NYPD Intelligence Division is, against all odds and attitudes of certainly the federal government, we placed NYPD Intelligence Division personnel around the country. And of course, they couldn't be placed in U.S. embassies because there are a lot of constraints on that, it wasn't an easily done or widely welcomed proposition. So what we did is we put our personnel in our sister agencies overseas. That would include UK Scotland Yard, the Paris Prefect in France, the Madrid Metropolitan Police. In Israel, we had a senior officer there. In Canada, we had someone in Quebec with the Quebec Sûreté, and it goes on and on. We assigned a person to a detective to Amman, Jordan, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, and it established a global presence for the NYPD and New York City, which was extremely important to do. In the period, subsequent to my tenure with the NYPD, I was asked by Commissioner Kelly, who's retired at the time, to work with him on the issue of the security attendant to the Jewish diaspora in Europe, which we did for several years.
Yeah, Camille told me she had a question which will reflect on that.
Yes,
Well,
Camille.
I had a question, not exactly on this topic per se, but one of the things that's happening now, as you probably are aware, is the focus is not just on international terrorism anymore. And in fact, the Attorney General created a unit within the past year or so to focus on domestic terrorism. Does your role have anything to do with domestic terrorism as well?
Well, I mean, that's among some of us in the business, it's a whether that move was needed or not is not universally agreed upon. Some think it's an overreach, that there is sufficient legal conditions, rules, regular laws that can appropriately be applied to concerns about domestic terrorism. And there are others that say, no, we have to redesign everything in the wake of January 6th, which seems to have been the driver. A lot of people have their own personal views on that. I mean, I have mine as a professional. I think it's, when you're talking about domestic investigative work, it's a very sensitive area. And the whole issue of even defining domestic terrorism is a very uncertain thing. I don't know. I don't know if there's a legal definition of terrorism as it's applied to the U.S. side. I think the events of Texas synagogue the other day, I mean, that's clear as a bell. That an individual came in, took hostages, whatever the threat was. It was unambiguous targeting of Jews, and an attempt. I'm not sure what the end goal was, but it's said in the media that his purpose was to free Afia Siddiqui, who I've experienced in the past because she passed through New York. She went to school in New York as well as Brandeis, I might add, and she's quite a threat then and would be if released. And there's some pressure to release her. And clearly, the terrorist at the synagogue seems to have been attempting to get her out of her 86-year prison term. So the whole issue of domestic terrorism, it's easily overstated. It's easily understated. You get into the very sensitive issue of First Amendment rights. How much do you have to say before you've crossed the line? to action, because you can think and pretty much say an awful lot of stuff before you.
Excuse me, there are a lot of people who don't know about this woman and why they
Oh,
why they went to that state.
Afia Siddiqui was she's a lady Al-Qaeda. I think it goes back to 2009. She went to school at Brandeis. She traveled through New York. I think she had family in actually in the Boston area. She scooted off to Pakistan and then Afghanistan, where she attempted to, she grabbed a rifle, tried to kill some U.S. soldiers over there, was captured, returned. And when we reviewed the material that she had on her, it was very interesting that, you know, her handwriting was very, very tiny little letters and, you know, words scrunched together. That immediately raises your alarm that, you know, what is the mentality that you have there? But any event, to make a long story short, she had handwritten rough drawings that we concluded were drawings of Grand Central Station, that the formulas looked like they were formulas for developing creating a radioactive device. So clearly a person of grave concern.
Now, you mentioned that First Amendment rights are a constraint in this field. What about the issue of suspected terrorists and the invasion of privacy that you have some organizations, say, for example, ACLU, who is very concerned about going too far and invading privacy of some people? Now, you have to balance invading privacy versus keeping people safe. How do you do that?
Well, it's a very, very careful balancing act, as you said. I might add that the NYPD was the first law enforcement agency to put together what, you know, in the United States, what I would call a serious program to look at the internet as a source of threat to New York City, because after the U.S. Got rid of the Taliban back in 2002, 2003, the training sanctuary that was available to Al-Qaeda and its associates was no longer available to them. And so what we saw at that time, by 2003, 2004, a major increase in the use of the internet to provide information to potential terrorists on, you know, tools, mechanisms, formula to create a bomb, to, you know, to even training, online training. So the whole issue of online exploitation of the internet and social media today, in those days, social media didn't really exist, is both very important and increasingly very, very sensitive, because there's a lot of chatter that can go on there in social media that you can say an awful lot without crossing a red line. So when there seems to be a conspiracy of a person is articulating thoughts that can translate easily into a real threat, it has to be attended to by law enforcement. You can't let that go by. The threshold should be low, but above the constitutional line. And it's very important that that law enforcement and intelligence personnel who are at that end of the game are well trained to understand where that line is. And so you have to be both aggressive and thoughtful in identifying individuals or groups of individuals. And then once you have that and you have the predicate for an investigation, you mount that investigation, and then you learn more about it. And some of it could turn out to be snappy patter, just chit chat, and of no consequence, and you put it to the side. And then you move on to the next. But creating the predicate is very important. And then you follow the four corners of the law, which both you ladies are very familiar with.
And also, you mentioned on the internet, I'm sure you're dealing too with the increasing threat of cyber threats. Being able to, some of the things that are really worrisome in this country, for instance, that with a snap of, with a touch of a key on a keyboard, they could blow up the electric grid or things like that. So is that part of the scope of what your background and what your profession looks into?
Well, certainly at the national level, that's a primary concern. Organizations have been developed, to take on the cyber challenge. I know in Washington, D.C., it's a very, very high, a top tier priority. And we've seen it most recently with the Capitol oil pipeline shut down, and it's ransomware. We're going to shut it down unless you pay us $5 million. And I'm not sure if they ever paid the $5 million, some portion of it, what have you, but it goes to, it could be very local. Theoretically, you go to Stop and Shop and say, look, if you don't deliver us a certain amount of money in a certain amount of time, we're going to disrupt your whole financial system. And you won't, so it's very vulnerable. It's very important for the private sector to understand what their vulnerability is, what portion of their information or their intellectual property is vital to protect, and make sure it's protected. And one of the most important ways to do that is to know who you're hiring, who has access to that information, and make sure that you understand its vulnerabilities and plug the holes that are most important. And of course, in the intelligence arena, we had the case of this Snowden, who was actually a contractor and worked in a number of places for the agency as a contractor, and before that as a staff employee, and then over time collected a vast amount of very sensitive information, stuck it in a thumb drive or something, and whisked off first to Hong Kong, and now he's been in Moscow for years, and he took with him some of our most sensitive secrets, and so the vulnerabilities go from the very large to the very small, but the cyber issue is something that everybody has to attend to.
Yeah, you think they'd back up the information and then change everything and then bring it forward. They must have a way, or they should be working on a way.
Well, the whole issue of cyber, there are different forms. There's criminal gangs around the world and even domestically, have the ability to, inject a spam or something that could create a serious problem very locally for individuals or small companies. Overseas, they have international gangs in Eastern Europe that do a lot of this on their own, or they could be essentially cyber mercenaries for foreign governments. And we know in the case of the geopolitical world, the cyber battle that no doubt goes on between Israel and Iran frequently. And the Iranians have tried to shut down Israeli water supply systems, and the Israelis have admitted to shutting down the centrifuges, the hypersonic centrifuges that the Iranians use to develop higher grade uranium for their their nuclear plants. So this is a very intense battle. And of course, in the case of China, we have a long history of the Chinese using the cyber world for intellectual property theft, but it doesn't stop there.
What about, since we're not on the subject, but what about this whole defund the police movement? Do you think it's ended now, or are they still looking for ways?
The defund the police program is interesting. It's very complex phenomena that's now 3-4 years old. It even precedes the COVID. I think defund the police has become, it's almost an acronym for a much larger problem. I think we have to back the problem up to, and you can see it on the news every night, where prosecutors in some of the major cities in the country, whether it's San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York now is probably the mother of district attorneys who are redefining what the law is. And they're eliminating criminal, what's defined as a crime and what level an illegal act is. Is it a felony or a misdemeanor? They're virtually redefining it, and I think it's created much of the havoc that we have now. And we have no bail situations where someone gets arrested, he's brought in for doing something that, and then they're basically let out. Even if they get prosecuted, then the judge lets them out on a no bail basis. So it's a revolving door. So what you have is a large number of persons who produce crime, who are brought in, turned around and let out, and they get to do it again. So the recidivism rate, which, normally you could say that traditionally over a 5-year period, someone who gets out of prison is a criminal. There's a 2/3 probability that they would commit another crime within a 5-year period. That period is probably, and I don't know, I'm making this one up, but it may be down to a year or months now, where they're brought in and let out, and they do it again. This individual, I think he just threw this young lady onto a track in New York City, a terrific young lady, Asian woman. She's just hardworking. Just tossed her into the subway. She's dead. His rap sheet goes back to 2010. You can't let that happen. Individuals like that should have been put away a time ago. So it's very complex. With respect to policing, it's a heavy demand on members of the law enforcement community to arrest someone, but when you bring them in, you know that they're going to be turned around, because what used to be a felony is now a misdemeanor, and which may be little more than a traffic ticket, and they're going to be going out.
People should understand a misdemeanor is like jaywalking, or like you say, a small traffic ticket.
So what we've seen in major cities, and it's just, you see it every day on the news, that one of the trends has been to increase the financial threshold for defining a felony, and so they're defining it down. In some cities, San Francisco, for example, I don't know what it is in New York, I don't know what it is in Boston, but the threshold is about $950. So if I go in and I steal a pocketbook, or 2 pocketbooks, or 10 pocketbooks, and their value is put at $800, I get a ticket. Essentially, it's a misdemeanor. Nothing happens. I go out, and 3 days later, I'm doing the same thing, and basically the same thing goes on. So I think that the issue isn't at the policing level. They've downgraded what criminality is to the point where criminality is now much more widespread. and it's across the
They can
country.
get away with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Will
no
they get
there's no
away with it?
penalty. And law enforcement, you know, the terrific law enforcement officers that I know watch this program, and both you persons strongly support. You know, they're put in a very difficult position that if they take an action that may put them at professional risk by grabbing someone the wrong way, who just stole something. And you know, they're potentially subject to charges, and you know, their families are at risk because they've done something that is considered outside of guidelines. They lose their job, they lose their pension or whatever. So it's a very troubling period we're in. And the difficulty in all of this, it's unclear to me as an observer. I'm no longer a participant in this arena, but as an observer, it's not clear to me how it gets turned around. But to put kind of a folksy phrase to it, you kind of get the law enforcement that you vote for. If you're electing prosecutors and others to positions that define criminality in a very non-traditional way, then that's what you get. So, you know, you get what you vote for.
Commissioner, we're going to have to wind up, but I think we got time for one more thing, which Camille and I were saving to the end, though there is no end, about the Afghanistan, how they ended the 20-year war, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my own personal views on Afghanistan are deeply and long held. I believe that our leaving Afghanistan was something that needed to be done with two main caveats. The important thing in Afghanistan was to secure Kabul. As long as Kabul was a functioning city, then, you know, Afghanistan and the Taliban were going to be kept at bay one way or another. I think we needed to maintain some sort of a footprint, maybe, you know, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 military with intelligence support in the country, and that with continued air support to the Afghan military. I think that would have been a wise course of action, and you know, keeping in mind that in the last year of our presence in Afghanistan, there was not one U.S. military killed in the line of duty. So
Yeah,
I think we
I'm
should have
sorry.
stayed with a footnote. But one other
This is what
thing,
we did the last time, Commissioner. We stopped you because we
the
have
way,
to.
but hold on one second. You can cut something up that I said earlier. That's why we have splices. The way we got out was shameful, and it's a blot on the U.S. On the United States for a long time to come.
And with that, Camille, you wind up. Because only Camille
Commissioner,
can wind up.
it's always fascinating to listen to you. I follow a lot of the things that you've talked about, and you hit it right on the head. I totally get what you're
Thank
saying,
you. Yes.
and I believe our viewers do as well. So we want to thank you for being here today, and we will absolutely reach out to you again, because you leave many things unanswered yet because we haven't asked them, but we will the next time.
Okay.
Thank you
Well,
to our
thank you
viewers.
both very much, and thank you for what you do with your community.
Thank you. You are a favorite. He's not even in Boston, and we reached out to him over Washington, D.C., and we were able to get him. So thank you.
To our
Okay.
viewers, thank you for watching, and remember to let us hear from you, because remember, this is your show, the law, your money, and you.
And you.